Always a pleasure. Good to have you with us on this Wednesday edition, Ed Schultz News and Commentary. And if you've been paying attention to the news or fake news, whichever you prefer, in the last 24 hours, it has been a roller coaster ride for the folks at CNN who are trying to get the egg off of their face. Through a former MI6 employee intel in the British government, to someone allegedly in Russia, through another operative, to BuzzFeed, and now on to CNN, there was a report that was given to the President of the United States and to the President-elect Donald Trump about some deplorable behavior that Donald Trump was involved in when he was in Russia some time ago. Now, this is not sourced, it's not confirmed, and CNN ran with it last night, and this was one of the first things that Trump talked about this morning at his press conference.
It's all fake news. It's phony stuff. It didn't happen. And it was gotten by opponents of ours, as you know, because you reported it, and so did many of the other people. It was a group of opponents that got together, sick people, and they put that crap together. So I will tell you that not within the meeting, but outside of the meeting, somebody released it. It should never have been, number one, shouldn't have even entered paper, but it should never have been released. But I read what was released, and I think it's a disgrace. I think it's an absolute disgrace. As far as hacking, I think it was Russia, but I think we also get hacked by other countries and other people.
So there you have it. A total disclaimer, number one, on anything negative about Donald Trump, and the first time that he has openly said that he thinks that Russia did hack. But he also deferred it, saying that we get hacked on a lot of different occasions. He also talked about President Putin. If he had information on Trump, he probably would have let it out.
President Putin and Russia put out a statement today that this fake news was indeed fake news. They said it totally never happened. Now, somebody would say, oh, of course he's going to say that. I respected the fact that he said that. And I'll be honest, I think if he did have something, they would have released it. They would have been glad to release it. I think, frankly, had they broken into the Republican National Committee, I think they would have released it, just like they did about Hillary and all of the horrible things that her people, like Mr. Podesta, said.
Like Mr. Podesta said about Hillary Clinton, and Trump went on to say that if someone had said that about him, he'd have fired him. All right, let's talk about the journalism of this. Maybe I'm just out of it. I don't think I am, because I do remember in my background, what I've seen in this industry in almost 40 years, that when people report something and it's not sourced properly, they're putting their job on the line. They're putting the credibility of the entire organization on the line. And I don't think anybody can get away with that. I don't want to hear from an anchor from CNN. I don't want to hear from some jackass over at BuzzFeed. Who are the owners? Who are the CEOs? It's time for them to step up and clarify exactly how they're going to own or disown or retract the story. I mean, there used to be a time in this business when people got fired for doing stuff like this. And it's kind of an important thing. It's about the intelligence community. You mean to tell me that fake news is being purported now by our intel community? Well, here's how Trump is handling it. He said today in his press conference that he's going to get his people in place, and he's going to report on hacking to the American people and our defense mechanisms in the next 90 days. Now, I don't know if you're a Trump fan or not, but what do you want the guy to do? He's president of the United States. He needs an intel apparatus that does not fall for fake news. But the journalism aspect of it, every journalist has to make a call. Do I report this? Do I go with this? What's the upside? What's the downside? Am I going to be able to source it later at a time that's going to cover the integrity and the credibility of me and the organization I work for? I want to talk to Ruth Conniff, Progressive Magazine. Ruth, good to have you with us.
Good to be with you, Ed.
What's your thoughts on all of this?
Well, I think BuzzFeed just dumped this document out there, and it wasn't sourced that well. But honestly, I don't, Trump just held a news conference in which he called basically all of the Washington press corps fake news outlets. And I think throwing around the word fake news is a way of basically saying you can't trust the media at all, and you're just going to have to listen to me, Donald Trump. So whether or not these salacious allegations in this document dump are true, we know there's plenty to worry about conflicts with Donald Trump. We know that he's behaved abysmally with women and bragged about it. So I guess I don't see that as a giant news flash, and I see his denunciation of the press as a bigger deal than whether or not BuzzFeed properly annotated this document. CNN, for Trump to yell at the CNN reporter today in the news conference and denounce CNN itself as a fake news organization, it just moves us into different territory as a country. That's just not how we're accustomed to operate.
What about the sourcing as a reporter? There's always that call. Do you go with it or do you not go with it? Take our viewers and listeners into that arena for a moment.
Well, I think, there is a long-standing practice in Washington of using anonymous sources. This is a U.S. official, apparently. And they, that is, when I was in Washington for many years, people become so fluent in that speak. This is on background. This is on deep background. This is not for attribution. And, it's a problem from a journalistic standpoint that basically journalists are so close to power in Washington that they abide by these rules, which they don't have to abide by, but it's just sort of how everyone is accustomed to doing business. You maintain your sources by protecting them, and people go on and off the record, sort of fluently in conversation. And reporters don't actually have to keep them off the record, but they do because they know that that's how they get their access. This document was not really annotated when BuzzFeed released it, so you can't tell. I mean, it has this feeling of credibility because you see the whole document, but you can't tell what's coming from where and what they judge to be a credible piece of the document and what they don't. And that's something that a lot of journalistic organizations would consider sort of standard operating procedure, that there should be some context. It shouldn't just be dumped out there. But, increasingly in our really rapid news environment, that's how people operate. They get a piece of information and they want to push it out there.
Trump has been pressured by a lot of people to either accept or disregard, and been called on it by many people on how, by elected officials for that matter, on whether he's going to accept the work of the intelligence community. Today he said, I think it was Russia. It was a quick comment, and then he went on to compare it to other hacks and said everybody hacks. What your thoughts on how he handled that?
I mean, if you watched Obama's farewell address last night and you watched Trump's press conference this morning, you saw this really bizarre movement in our country from a really articulate and thoughtful approach to politics to a guy who talks about himself and talks in incomplete sentences. And it's just unbelievable what's happening to our country. I mean, that's sort of the context that I put it in. And when he says, on the one hand, he thinks it's Russia that hacked, and on the other hand, he goes back into campaign mode and says, Podesta said horrible things about Hillary, horrible things. I would have fired him if somebody said those things about me. He's talking about the substance of the hack, and you remember during the campaign, he said he would encourage Russia to hack more. So what are we doing here? This is potentially really a big deal. I thought that Ariel Dorfman who was in Allende's Chile, wrote a great op-ed in the New York Times about, hacking and disrupting elections in another country. I would trust the CIA to know something about that. I mean, other governments attempt to disrupt elections in our country, and the United States has done that in other countries like Chile. That's a major national security concern. And it's not about one guy, Donald Trump. And it's not about the campaign and, whether he can point fingers at a Hillary Clinton official for insulting Hillary Clinton. It's, this is a much more serious issue than that. And we have a president coming into office who doesn't take it seriously because he thinks only about himself. Getting to policy. Trump said this about Obamacare when he was finally asked about it.
We're going to be submitting, as soon as our secretary is approved, almost simultaneously, shortly thereafter, a plan. It'll be repeal and replace It will be essentially simultaneously. It will be various segments, you understand, but will most likely be on the same day or the same week, but probably the same day, could be the same hour. So we're going to do repeal and replace, very complicated stuff. And we're going to get a health bill passed. We're going to get health care taken care of in this country. You have deductibles that are so high that after people go broke paying their premiums, which are going through.
All right, now he's getting into the detail, but I want to talk about the process of what the Republicans are going to do, Ruth. There are as many as 3 Republican senators right now that are saying, hold the phone. Until we have a replacement plan, there should not be a gap. Even Mitch McConnell has talked about that. Trump is saying, as you just heard him, it's going to happen as soon as Tom Price is confirmed as HHS secretary. What's happening here? Somebody's not connecting on the Republican Party with the president-elect, and what are we hearing?
I mean, the Republican Party, as you know, has been obsessed with repealing the Affordable Care Act from the moment it was enacted. How many total votes were there in Congress? 50? To try to repeal it.
Yeah.
And the reason that they're obsessed with it is the same reason that the Republican Congress was obsessed with repealing the New Deal under FDR, because it's really helped some people, and that's politically good for Democrats and bad for Republicans. And so, you know, this is the Republican Party obsession. Replacing it's not so easy. And the idea that in a week or a day they're going to rework the United States healthcare system in a way that's going to be far superior to the admittedly partial progress the Affordable Care Act made is preposterous. So, you know, the question now is, are they going to start leaving people out in the cold, or are they going to pretend that, you know, are they just going to rename it Trump Care in this place? Are they going to pretend to make progress? Because once you start to unravel pieces of it, including the individual mandate, I mean, people don't like the idea that they're going to have to pay a fine if they don't get health insurance, but there's got to be a way to fund this system, and you can't just have people who are really expensive to cover in the system and nobody else. So, you know, how do you begin to pull out threads without paying the political price of taking people's health insurance away? That's going to be a dilemma for the Republicans, and it is not at all clear what they're going to do because they don't have a plan like the Affordable Care Act.
And in the meantime, a lot of Americans could get hurt. Ruth Conniff, editor, Progressive Magazine. Thanks so much. I appreciate it.
Yeah, great to talk to you, Ed.
You bet. Thanks so much. When we come back, Senator Jeff Sessions is getting historic pushback from a colleague in the Senate. Stay with us. Ed Schultz News and Commentary continues.
From the steel mills of Pennsylvania, to the auto factories of Michigan, to the modern makers movement, manufacturing makes our nation great. I'm Scott Paul, president of the Alliance for American Manufacturing. We bring business and labor together to advocate for policies that everyone can agree on. Together, we can strengthen manufacturing and create good-paying American jobs. Help us keep it made in America.
Good to have you back with us. Communication Workers of America, Alliance for American Manufacturing, American Postal Workers Union, and Ring of Fire Radio bring you Ed Schultz News and Commentary. Historic hearing, should I say, on Capitol Hill today as the confirmation hearing of Jeff Sessions continues, the senator from Alabama. He's going down in the history books just as much as Cory Booker is. Here's what happened. Booker, who is a senator from New Jersey, first time ever, historic, steps up in front of the Senate Judiciary Committee and gives reasons why his colleague, Jeff Sessions, should not be the Attorney General.
One of the victories of the modern civil rights movement was the 1957 Civil Rights Act, which in effect made the Attorney General not only the chief law enforcement officer of the United States, but also vested in that office the responsibility to pursue civil rights and equal protection for all of America. Senator Sessions has not demonstrated a commitment to a central requisite of the job, to aggressively pursue the congressional mandate of civil rights, equal rights, and justice for all of our citizens. In fact, at numerous times in his career, he has demonstrated a hostility towards these convictions and has worked to frustrate attempts to advance these ideals. If confirmed, Senator Sessions will be required to pursue justice for women, but his record indicates that he won't.
Senator Cory Booker in New Jersey saying that Senator Sessions from Alabama should not be the next Attorney General. Back to Trump's press conference for just a moment. There are no deals with Russia, there are no loans with Russia, and there are no pending deals with Russia, according to Donald Trump. And oh, by the way, I think he probably said one of the most truthful things he's ever said, that CNN quite oftentimes is fake news. Ed Schultz, News and Commentary. We're back tomorrow.